Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or whenever you may be tuning in to the Growing Our Future podcast. We really appreciate you stopping by. We enjoy this podcast because it's an opportunity for us to find folks that are willing to pour into others, to share their time, talent, testimonies, experiences. And like we always say, if you want to know what the future is, grow it. Well, the way you grow something is you got to plant the right seeds. Well, today's no different, folks. We have got an extraordinary guest, and I cannot wait to get to their seeds of greatness that I know if we plant them in our lives, we're going to grow something mighty, have a harvest and a bounty we're sharing. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor, and you're going to get to hear more about this man here in a second, but it's an honor to have Dr. Coach Nate Hearne. Coach, thank you for joining us today.
My honor, Aaron, to be here. And I love the way you talk about seeds because, oh man, those seeds were poured into me by some great people over the years. And many of them, that's an eternal friendship. It's going to last forever. I'll never forget them.
I'm with you. Trust me. That's the power of testimony. What you just said, that's the power of testimony. We stand on the shoulders of the people that went before us, and we're grateful for the seeds that people share, which is why, Coach, we're grateful that you're with us today so that you're going to get a chance to share with an audience of students, with adults, with sponsors, with educators, and it goes around. Amazing, Coach, how many people around the world watch this podcast. Blows me away. So
that's awesome.
Just know that your words here are going to become seeds of greatness. And I appreciate you taking time to join us.
I'm honored.
All right. Well, Coach, here's the thing. Every person that comes on this show, everybody gets the same first question. Coach, what are you grateful for today? What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today, to know that our future is with our students. That's been my heart for ever, to know that they're out there, they want to learn, they want to grow, they want to make a great nation. And I'm honored to be a part of that, to know that we can do this and it has an effect for the future.
I'm going to agree with you. You know, when Tom Ziegler, by the way, folks, Coach Nate and I have a mutual friend and Tom Ziegler, the son of the late, great Zig Ziglar. And when Tom and I first started talking, Coach, we were talking, he said, well, tell me what you do. And I said, I'm in the future business. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I'm in the kid business.
Okay.
And if you're in the kid business, you're in the future business.
Sure.
And so I appreciate what you said because it's an honor. I know you're grateful for that. It's an honor, too, for me to sit in the seat that I sit in and have an opportunity to work with young people and to work with educators. So thank you so much for what you're grateful for. Coach, I know that there are some that may be tuning in that have heard your story, have heard of you, but we've got a lot of young listeners that might not know when we talk about Friday Night Lights and we talk about Zig Ziglar sometimes, it's not something that's immediate in their wheelhouse. I know the success that you've had as a coach, as a husband, as a father, in so many roles that you've played. I know you didn't just fall into that seat. Something tells me that there was a journey. There was things that happened, doors that opened, doors that closed, that led you to where you're at today. If you would take a moment and just kind of walk us through Coach Nate's journey and how you got to where you're at today.
It's just awesome. Yeah, the main thing is, like you said, I had seeds poured into me, watered and nourished by some great people. The two that my parents were great, wonderful parents. I came from a home of seven other brothers and sisters, and my parents, they poured into us the things that we were supposed to do and how we were supposed to do it. And the most important thing was to be caring and kind and helping. of
Mm,
service. My parents were people of service orientation. So, but they were not educators
mm,
and grew up poor. I didn't know where my next meal was going to come from. I wore hand-me-down clothes. I didn't know if I was going to come home to the same house sometimes.
mm.
But my parents uh, kept us together and provided for us. School was different. You need it. You grow up in poverty and you know that you're isolated out there and things are just not the same.
Mm.
Sometimes the world can be cruel and you need that teacher figure, authority figure that can come along and say, hey, you're okay.
Mm.
I think you're going to do great things someday.
Mm.
Every one of us need that, a smile, a pat, an encouraging word. So I got that from two great men, a science teacher, seventh grade, and my football coach did that for me. And I'm eternally grateful for the seeds that they planted in me because, Aaron, I would not have made it without their encouragement.
Wow.
My science teacher, he took me under his wing. He made me his lab assistant in his class. My football coach, a seventh grade football coach, Mark Wallace, my science teacher's name was Mr. Clyde Hake.
Where
He
was this
took,
at, Coach?
this was Andrews, Texas,
Andrews, Texas.
West Texas, and
West,
a
yeah.
little small town, maybe 5,000 people at the most. You know, they took me under their wing and nourished me. I became from their nourishment, from their seed planting, the thing that I wanted to do. And I decided at an early age, because of their influence in my life, I remember that I said, you know, I was one of those, you know, trouble children. I had lots of trouble in school. I wasn't successful until I met those two men. And they turned my out. My grades were bad. I made C's, D's, and F's in elementary school. You know, I had behavior problems.
Mm.
And then I met those two men and it just flipped. I went from
Mm.
making F's and D's on my report cards to being on the honor roll because of their influence. And I decided in the seventh grade that I wanted to be a science teacher and a coach. And in that moment, I would never let it go.
Wow.
I never let it go.
Wow.
And today, I still follow their leadership, the examples that they set for me. Today, I'm 73 years old, and I still follow the things that they taught me when I was in the seventh grade.
I know we've got a lot more to talk about. We could stop right there, though. Just listen, Coach. Here's the thing when we talk about growing the future and seeds of greatness, what I tell people, the reason why people's testimonies are so powerful is if you'll listen to somebody's testimony, Tony Robbins said, success leaves clues. And if you listen to folks' testimony, you start finding those seeds.
Yeah,
Just in your first sharing there, you talked about encouragement. You talked about expectation. You talked about accountability.
yes,
And you also trickled in a little want to,
yes,
because none of that words of encouragement and none of that opportunity that was presented to you could have ever been nourished and brought fruit if you wouldn't have had some want to. And you obviously had a little want to. I think you sounds like you wanted to maybe have a little more than what you had growing up. You were encouraged by what somebody gave you, so you wanted to kind of share that with somebody else.
yes.
I kind of picked up on that,
Mhm.
these are the kind of seeds of greatness that I hope people hear. One of the things that I share with some of our youth leaders, coaches, I tell them, I said, go ahead, get into school and you can take all you want. I said, get into junior high, get into middle school, get into high school, and you can take. I said, if you go to college, guess what? You still may find a few opportunities to take.
Right.
I said, but once you get out in the real world, it's going to get a little bit harder to take.
Yes.
I said, but if you can learn at an early age to serve, when you get into high school, you can
Yes.
serve.
Yes.
When you get into college, you can serve.
Yes.
And when you get out of college and you start a career and you live in a neighborhood and you live in a community, guess what? There are going to be needs and an opportunity to serve.
Always.
So think big about that service component, because it doesn't matter if you become a coach, it doesn't matter if you become director of a nonprofit, it doesn't matter what your role is in life. Giving back to others is probably one of the greatest gifts. And you and I both know, what did Zig always say?
Yes,
You can get anything in life you want
that's right.
if you help enough other people get what they want.
If they want. That's right.
So you were a coach. So tell me, you became a coach. I know you didn't just fall into a state championship. So what does that journey look like to build a team, to build a program? And here's one for you, coach, to build a culture of excellence and winning.
Yeah, you have to have the right mindset to build that kind of culture. You have to have a process, and you have to get the guys to believe in that process. It's like anything in life. If it's going to be successful, the most important thing in any entity are the people, the relationship with the people, the relationships with those young men. We had to nurture and grow those relationships in order for them to excel in that program, because it was a very difficult program. It was based on a college level program. We instituted, the first coach instituted that and came down to the high school level and instituted, and it began to take off. And for 35 years at Permian High School, we had that winning percentage of 88.9%. 6 state championships, national champions, team of the decade. The times that I was there, the 10 years, the years that I served there, we were named team of the decade with 122 wins and 11 losses. Just unheard of. And most amazing thing about those guys, they were undersized. One time, Aaron, we're playing in the semifinals for the state with the smallest team in Texas. But
Wow.
we're in the big school division. Our middle linebacker weighs 145. None of our linemen are over 200 pounds. The smallest team in the stadium, we're playing against another team, and they have 7 Division I already scholarship athletes on the team. They've got the 250s, the 260s, the 270s, and those guys with the heart of a lion. We lost that game 28-21. So that was the nature of that school, and a culture. Because of that, the moniker was Mojo. Because of that,
Mojo.
Mojo, we had a following. They built a stadium in 1980, and people thought they were crazy. They built a stadium in 1980 in Odessa, Ratliff Stadium, that seat 28,000 people for high school football. This was in 80, and they thought we were crazy. And they filled that stadium every Friday night when we played at home for 31 years. For 31 years, right? And with that kind of atmosphere, with that kind of following, we had over 500 students in the band, 380 pepettes, a community that would follow us to the end of the world to watch us play, to support us. That program brought to that community. And when you have something like that, it changes the community. It changes everybody. It affects a lot of lives when you have that kind of culture in the school behind students who want to excel. They want to do the good thing. They want to do the right thing. They're playing. It's wholesome. It's mom, apple pie, white picket fence. That's what it was, right?
You know, God, there's so much there. Again, it's the reason why I love doing these interviews, because there's so many little things, if people will just listen, that you can pick out. Success begets success. And when you can help create a success in a kid's life, listen to what you just shared. It was so beautifully. You didn't just talk about the football team. You talked about how those successes were duplicated in fine arts. They were probably duplicated in other classroom activity.
Yeah.
They were probably duplicated I guarantee you, anybody that knows small town Texas, there's coffee shops where everybody gathers to cuss and discuss what's wrong with the
That's
country and
exactly right.
everything else. But when you're winning, guess what they're talking about? They're talking about success.
Yes.
How did they get that success? How did they plan that play? How did they plan for that team? How did we know we were going to be outmanned? We were going to be outweighed, but we weren't going to be outhearted. And so what you just shared is the beauty of success. One of the guests that I've had on here, Coach, is a guy. Matter of fact, I worked for him when his company first started. He just made the largest gift in Texas Tech University history. He gave him a $44 million gift.
Oh my.
And he very much humble beginnings and just became he very successful. But what he likes to say that I like is he says it's okay to win. It's okay to win.
Yeah.
Y'all put in a lot of work.
Yes.
It's okay that you won.
It's true.
No one gave it to you.
No.
No one said you're entitled to it.
No.
You were grateful for the opportunity. You put in the work and you reap the results.
Yes.
It's okay to win.
It's okay to win.
And success begets success.
It does.
And y'all did that throughout. I can tell you, and I think I mentioned this to you before, in 1985, I was state FFA president. And I would travel 4 to 5 schools a day, 5 days a week. So I traveled all over the state of Texas. I've been in
Right.
high schools all over the state. And to your point, in 1985, 86, and that year, I remember coming to Permian. And I remember driving by the football stadium. And I remember saying, that's where the mojo happens. I also remember, you'll remember this too. I remember the Monday moguls.
Yes. Yes.
Isn't it? But, and I remember when they built a brand new high school and football field in Gilmer, Texas.
Yes.
You remember? And
Yeah.
so it's amazing how a structure
Yeah.
can become kind of a flagpole,
That's true.
kind of rally around. But something you said, Coach, and I'm always listening in these interviews to find the title of this interview. And I'm not saying I've got it yet. I'm just giving you an example. You can have all the structures in the world, but if you don't have the right people and the right culture, you just got a pretty structure.
So
And the first thing that you said when you started to tell me about your journey was you said it's about the people.
must be.
That was the first thing you said.
It's right.
And I wrote that down
That's,
because God didn't create us to be the Lone Ranger.
no.
Life is not a solo project. And you said it. You said it was all about the people.
Yeah, and I know that you know this, and I hope this is what the students get from this, is that anything that you do in life, the thing that makes that success is that you have to know who you are, right? Knowing your identity, knowing who you are, becoming self-aware. John Maxwell, in his book Self-Awareness, he says that's the most important thing in life, that you have to be able to identify who you are. If you're able to identify who you are, then you can plan anything. You can plan your life because you know what you want, you know who you are. And that's why the people are so important. And you said it, you can get a good product, a good stadium, you can have a great process. But if you don't have the people who know who they are, it's not going to work, right? They gotta, when Callie and I do a program called Core Clarity, and it's all about helping students identify their strengths. Because we feel this way. If you know your gifts, if you're an achiever, if you're a communicator, if you're a relator, if all of those things you know about yourself, when you walk across that stage, instead of handing you the keys to the Beetle, Volkswagen, they're handing you the keys to the Audi, the Mercedes, the Maserati, right? Because you know who you are.
right.
You're not guessing anymore about your future. You know where you want to go and you know what you want to do. That seed has been planted. And now all it has to do is be watered.
Mm, mm. Writing that one down too. Know who you are. That's powerful. And by the way, when you say that, I don't mind throwing this in, Coach, because I'm not ashamed of spirituality. I'm not ashamed of faith. And the reason I appreciate you saying you got to know who you are is because I know who made you. And God doesn't sponsor any flops and he doesn't make any trash. So let me tell you something. There's not a person listening to this show that was not created for anything less than greatness.
Right.
And all we got to do sometimes is look around, find that encourager,
That's right.
find those skills,
Mm-hmm.
and be the best version. You know, one of the guests that we've had on here, Coach, and I don't know if y'all's paths have ever crossed. And if you haven't, I'm going to make an introduction. But
Okay.
his name is Dan Owolabi.
Have it.
Dan Owolabi. Well, let me say this, Coach. Tom Ziegler, who's a mutual friend of ours, Tom holds you in very high esteem. And he's told me, he said, Aaron, Coach Nate could be next to my dad, the best speaker I've ever heard. That's pretty powerful commentary coming from Tom Ziegler. And I'm going to tell you that Dan Owolabi could be one of those as well that you need to get to know. He wrote a book called Authentic Leadership, and he talks about being your authentic self
Yes.
and not trying to be something that you're not,
Not.
or you're trying to become something that the world's told you that you've got to become. So when you said that, you got to know who you are. There's a lot of wisdom in that comment. A lot of wisdom in that comment.
Yeah. And you get people who will work and do a job in some companies, and these people are really good at what they do. Um, but if they don't love what they're doing,
Mm,
they can
mm,
even be paid handsomely for it.
mm,
And sometimes if you don't sit down and ask them, get to know them, just like you said at the beginning of this, you got to get to know people. You got to talk to people.
mm.
If you don't know them, you don't know if they're happy in that job or not. Even though they get paid handsomely, even though people come in and say, "Oh, you're great at this," they might not like it because it's not who they are. It's not.
Mm.
They don't identify with that because it's parts of that they really don't love it. And when you talk to them, they go, "I can do it. I do it well, but I don't like it." And if you have a gift, we do not call it a strength if you don't love what you're doing. It's not a strength.
It's not a strength if you don't
You
love what
gotta
you
love
do.
it. And there's millions of people out there doing things that they don't love doing, right, Aaron?
Man, that's good. Oh, Coach, that's good. I've been the development officer now here for the Texas FFA Foundation for 25 years. And I've had my share of opportunities, as you might imagine. I've had a
Yes.
lot of people say, "Hey, if you ever want to make a change, I'd love to have you." And there's been some very attractive financial offers, but there's no amount of money that you can place on a heart that's bent for a passion and a purpose that they believe they've been given.
And a purpose. Yes.
And there were a lot of doors that closed on my journey, and there
Yep.
was a lot of doors that opened to put me where
Yes.
I'm at. And I couldn't agree with you more. I know a lot of people that have told me, Aaron, I make a lot of money, but I wished I could be as happy as you are.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
at the end of the day, we're in charge of that.
Yes, we are.
Nobody else is in charge of my happiness.
No, it's
You
not.
know, we're in charge of that.
That's right.
And so, to your point, if you can find that thing that makes you happy, that thing that gives your passion purpose, you're going to be wealthy.
Yes, you are.
You're going to be rich in spirit. You're going to
Yes.
be rich with friends.
Yes.
And you're going to have enough money to pay the bills. But it's like I tell people, if you'll just manage what you got, maybe at the end of the month, you might have a little bit left over. And there might be somebody that needs a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you get to help them. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Coach, tell me about a time that you had to take a stand for what was right for your students or your players. What does it look like in a leadership role when you have to make those kind of tough decisions to stand for what you think is right?
There's so many, Aaron. But I remember one. You might be familiar with this. This students back in the day started maybe 2003, 2004. They went to the zero tolerance policy, and legislators were hammering that zero tolerance policy.
Mm,
Uh, Zero tolerance policy was based on, the weapon things, knives, guns, things like
mm,
that. If a
mhm.
student came to school, had those kind of things, ammunition, things like that, the state was saying, and it was trickled down to the administrators. That's it. You expel them.
Mm,
No warnings, no, you expel them. And it's not to their discipline school. It was to JJAEP, the Juvenile Justice
yep, yep, yep,
AEP
yep,
program,
yep,
which
yep.
is one step away from prison, right?
Absolutely. TYC.
No,
It used to be TYC. Yep,
it's right.
yep,
So right?
yep.
So that's pretty tough. And we had a situation where a young man, the officer brought, SRO officer brought an arrow and an ID into my office early on a Monday morning. And he just laid it on my desk. He didn't say a word. He just shook his head and he just walked, backed up. I knew what it was, right? He did too, because we talked about it. That's zero tolerance. Zero tolerance. It's an arrow. That's ammunition. That's how they saw it. That was automatic expulsion to JJAP. Took the young man's ID, looked him up. He's a senior. He's an AB student. He has no discipline referrals. He's got maybe one or
Mm,
two
mm,
excused absences. Good student, right?
mm,
A class of 1,100 students, and he's the kind you never see, right? You never get the chance to spend it with the good ones, right?
mm.
He's a good student.
Right.
I send for him, comes in, and he says, Mr. Hearne, am I going to be expelled? I said, all the records show that. I say, everything here is leaning towards that. This is an arrow. It's in your truck. And I said, before we get into all of that, tell me how this happened. So he said, I have a friend whose dad bought him one of those high dollar crossbows. I mean, this is an expensive bow. He and his dad hunts a lot. And he called me, and so we went hunting, but not like he and his dad. We were just target practicing with. We shoot at rabbits or stuff like that, or just shoot at some targets, and that's all we were doing. But when we finished the day, I took him home, and when I dropped him off, I looked in my back seat, and there was the arrow. He said, so I took the arrow, put it in the front seat, and I'm going to pick him up. We're going to go to lunch, and I'd give him the arrow back. He said, Mr. Hearne, that's not my arrow.
Mm,
I said, I understand.
mm,
I said, but the state, the school district, everybody sees that possession is 99% of the zero tolerance policy. It is in your possession. If I called his parents and tell them that we have an arrow in my office, they're going to say he didn't bring it to school, and they're going to get lawyers. And you and I are going to become the bad guys. And you might lose your best friend out of this. So I need to call your parents. He said, Mr. Hearne, I never knew my father. He left my mom and my little brother, my mom and little brother at an early age. They got a divorce. So my brother, younger, he never saw him. He never knew. And he said, my mother is in the hospital in the ICU unit
mm,
with colon cancer.
mm.
You can call her, but they're not going to let you speak to her. That situation just got darker, right? I mean, so I said, I'm going to send you back to class. and I've got to check this out. I'll go by and check the hospital, and then I'll call you in the morning
Mm. Mm.
and tell you what we're going to do with this. Immediately after he leaves, about 5 minutes later, I get a call from the secondary superintendent over secondary, assistant superintendent over secondary. He asked me what's going on. I tell him, I tell him about the arrow. I tell him about the student. And he's like, oh, that's a pretty unfortunate situation, but our funding is based on how we handle these zero tolerance
Mm.
policies, these zero tolerance circumstances. He said, keep me updated. The superintendent and I'm sure the school board wants to know. So what is he saying? Read between the lines. You stay the policy, do the right thing, right? This is a good kid.
Mm.
Hold the policy, do the right thing. I go to the hospital and he's right. And you know
Mm.
colon cancer, they're in that
Mm.
IC unit, they're covered with plastic, tubes are running, monitors monitoring her. And the head nurse on that unit, she was nice enough to talk to me. I could look inside, I could see it through the window. And she told me, hey, there's not a lot of, she doesn't have a lot of visitors here. She said maybe one or two, but the prognosis doesn't look good. Stage 4 colon cancer.
Mm.
So I leave, get up in the morning, send for him, send for the SRO officer, take the arrow. Aaron, I break it. I throw it in the trash. And so I said, now, this situation for you is over. No one will approach you again about this. I sent him back to class, right? In Tom's book, The 10 Virtues, Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Time, he talks about being the light, right?
Mm.
Talks about being the light in dark situations, that we have to be the leader. We have to shine the light, right? And sometimes shining that light is kind of tough because, people put your job on the line. My job was nowhere near it as important as that young man's life, right?
Right.
It didn't equate, Aaron.
Right. That.
So sometimes being the light means you have to take the air brake and throw it in the trash, right? Because
Right.
you know who's in charge. God's always in charge, Aaron. He's always in charge. And when we have that relationship with God, we don't have to have anybody validate
Mm.
us. We don't need to be validated by anybody.
Mm. So much in that story. So much. What a gift God gave you with that young man. What a gift God gave you with that situation. Because there's no telling how many times you've had an opportunity to share that story and have people sit and reflect. My board chairman always says, Aaron, the right thing is always the right thing.
Always the right thing.
He said it's never too late to do the right thing.
Never.
And when you hear stories like that, it just makes you appreciate ethical leadership, core values, confidence. It goes back to what you just said, knowing who you are. You knew who you were when you made that decision. You knew what value system drove you to make that decision. There was no hesitation there. One of my favorite books on leadership is Captain Sully
Oh, yeah.
that landed the plane there in the Hudson.
Yeah.
And of course, they got everybody off. Sully was one of the last ones off. The media's going crazy. They want to interview him, but obviously they got to do a debrief. And as they're walking down a hallway, a flight attendant, she still frazzled from the accident, but she runs up to him and she hands him a piece of paper that's folded in half. And it's still wet, crinkled up. And on the outside of the paper, it simply read, "Thank you." And when he opened it up on the inside, it said, When your values are clear, your choices are easy. When your values are clear, your choices are easy. And when you share stories like that, Coach, that right there for me is a reminder that when we face those moments that we have to make decisions, tough decisions, that when your values are clear, your choices are easy.
Easy.
Powerful story. Coach, before we wrap up, we got a lot of kids that'll be watching this that want to be leaders. They want to aspire to leadership. Give me 3 leadership tips. If you could plant the seeds of leadership tips, what would you tell kids to become better leaders?
3 things.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, listen, listen.
Got it.
That's the only way to let people know that you care about them, right?
Mm.
I see it all the time, and you do too, Aaron. We get in there and we talk to people, and some people ask, well, how you doing? Well, you tell them, and they really don't want to hear it, right?
Mm.
They
Mm.
really don't want to hear what you got going on because they want to talk about what they have going on.
Mm.
And when you sit and you listen to a student, they know you're listening. I don't know how many times students had come to me, kids that I've coached, kids in totally other sports, kids that just in my room, kids who knew me from other students talking about me, kids who I coached that wasn't even their position coach would come to me, come to my room and say, Coach, I have a problem. And when they finished, they said, Coach, I came to you because I knew you would listen. How many lives do we touch, Aaron? Just listening. Just listening.
What a powerful mentorship that is. Because if you can learn to listen, there will always be somebody that needs to be listened to.
Oh,
I remember Tom Ziegler, he tells a story about his dad. He said, Tom, how do you know somebody needs encouragement? And he said, I don't know. And he said, if they're breathing, they need encouragement.
they do.
And we're all going to go through seasons of life. I had a lady once, and she was really just sharing some really heartbreaking events that she's dealing with. And I just listened. Like you said, Coach, I didn't have the answer.
Yeah.
I just listened. And I finally looked at her and I said, I'm sorry. I said, by the way, I said, if you want a place that it never rains, I can take you there. And she said, what do you mean? I said, sounds like you've had some storms. And I said, but I can take you to a place that it never storms. And she said, really? I said, yeah. I said, it's called a desert and nothing grows.
Nothing grows.
But you show me somebody that's had a little rain, a little storm,
Yes.
and with the right mentors, with the right encouragers, with the right seeds,
Mm.
with the right stewardship, I'll show you somebody that's bound for a bountiful harvest.
Awesome.
So,
So awesome.
Coach, I can't tell you thank you enough. I will never forget the first time we met. Obviously, I knew a little of your story before we ever met. And sometimes you meet people and you wonder, is the story as good as the person behind the story? And I've got to say, Coach, not only did you meet that expectation, you exceeded it.
Thank you.
And I value what you do. I value what you've done. And I value more what you're going to do.
Thank you.
Because I know God's not finished with you.
Mm.
And there's still a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of lives to be touched, a lot of people to be encouraged, a lot of people that need the example and the mentorship.
That's very good.
So I just want to thank you. But you don't get out of here without a fun question.
Yes, sir.
So everybody that's been on this show gets a fun question at the very end. So the question is this, Coach Nate Hearne, Dr. Nate Hearne, what's the best concert you ever been to?
Oh, man. The best concert. To tell you the truth, the best concert I ever been to, I put it together.
Let me hear it.
I was asked after I retired, I was asked to see if I would be a chaplain uh, in the prison system in the
Yeah.
Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
Yeah.
So I said, no problem, because I want to go in there and help, right? That's my whole thing.
Right, right.
God says, hey, where were you when I was in prison, right? So I'm saying, I'm going to be here, right? I'm going to do what you asked me to do. So I know to touch souls, sometimes music is key.
Mm,
If you got the right music,
mm,
if you're a pastor and you got the right music and it's hitting and see the Holy Spirit coming down,
mm.
you don't even have to if you can humble yourself, you don't need a message. Just extend the invitation. Right? The Holy Spirit's already working. That happened. I brought a gospel fest to a prison unit. 15 different groups of all
Wow.
genre, of all ethnicity,
Wow.
blacks, whites, browns, just every kind of music you want to hear. And the inmates had to make a request to attend. 1,100 men on the unit, 700 asked to be, could they attend? And the group got up. They had the full ensemble, all 5 instruments. They had background singers, they had a lead singer, and they started. And they were really, really good. They were really, really good. And 700 inmates in white. Just picture this scene, right? 700 of them. The music is Christian and it's flowing. A little bitty guy, about 5'3", on the very back in the middle row, outside seat. He stood up and he just said, Jesus. And then he started doing forward rolls. And when he got to the front, he said, Jesus. And all the other inmates stood up and they just, Jesus. They're
Mm.
clapping, they're dancing, and some are on their knees, some hands extended, some just circling. And you hear this, the COs, correction officer, you hear those radios start cracking. They go, Major, you want to lock him up? You want to lock him up? And the major goes, yes, lock him up. And then the warden says, leave him alone,
Mm.
leave him alone. And then
Wow.
there's a pause, Aaron. And then she says, that's the Holy Spirit. But that moment, Aaron, the
Wow.
Holy Spirit descended down on those men, and all that pent up. In prison, there's a lot of things going on. All of that emotion
Mm.
came flowing out of them, and they began to praise God.
Mm. Wow. Wow.
That was nothing but a God moment. And I get goosebumps telling that story, Aaron,
That's
because I
awesome.
saw it real. It was real. I saw it.
Well, let me tell you something, Coach. What you just shared, number one, that was incredible. And when you talk about a concert, that was incredible. And but in closing, you also made another point that I like to share with people, and that is this: you can never argue with somebody's testimony.
Never.
You can never look at somebody and say that didn't happen to you. So, folks, what you just heard from the coach, I have every reason to believe, down to the detail, that what you just heard was the best concert that man's ever seen.
Bar none.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for another episode of Growing Our Future. I like to tell people that our country's got three vital and renewable resources. That's young people and agriculture and leadership.
Amazing.
And we combine all three, and we get to bring guests on that say, "Hey, let me tell you what I found to be successful. Let me share with you what I found to be encouraging. Let me share with you some seeds that helped me grow a success in life." And they're here sharing those seeds with us. And today we were honored, we were blessed by Coach Nate Hearne, Dr. Nate Hearne. And Coach, again, thank you so much. We appreciate you. We appreciate all of you that stopped by today. And until we meet again, go out and do something great for somebody else. You're going to feel good about it. More importantly, you might just be the example for somebody else that's going to go out and change the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll catch you down the road.